Welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to have everyone join for part one of the Recession Proof Your Sales series. My guest today is Christophe Martel. He's a veteran of 35 years in the business world. And in that time, he's led teams across 4 continents in a number of businesses, very big brands such as IBM, HP, Computervision, CEB, and he's currently the CEO and co-founder of TI People, which is an HR consultancy, and they're helping their clients create incredible experiences with their employees rather than the traditional compensation for time, labor, and skills. Christophe has been involved in sales during the last 3 recessions, I believe. And in that time, he has led sales team to continued performance while others have probably found it quite challenging. So I'm extremely delighted to have him on our webinar and podcast today and hear some of his advice around how do we start to focus on the right things, especially during a recession, whether you're a sales leader, a business leader, or a sales professional. So I'm delighted to have him on the show today. Christophe, welcome.
Thanks, Mo, and thanks for reinforcing to everyone that I'm a veteran, because it's been so many years that I've been doing this. So, but good to be on your show.
Well, we're excited to hear what the guidance that you have and the advice that you have for us. And I think, whilst I don't know officially if recession has been confirmed, we haven't hit that 2 quarter yet. I think the data seems to show it's pretty clear. And I think the next stage really is, do we technically hit a depression, which requires far more of a decline? But I think everyone is prepared, or at least expecting this recession to be confirmed. So people's minds are now towards how do we as salespeople and professionals start to navigate through that. I guess the first question really is, whilst you've seen at least 3, not everyone listening has vivid memory of 3 or more, but they can certainly remember the last one. And the first question really is, what was your experience? Well, what did you take away from the last recession? And especially in terms of the aftermath as well, what were the things that were key for you there?
So let me see. If I go back to the few hits that I lived through in management roles. First one was in Asia in '97. Second was the 2000 .com crash, then 2008, and then in Europe we had the Brexit blues in 2011.
Yeah.
And so with pretty much each one of these events, first thing is that they don't last forever. So that's when you're in it, it feels like it's going to last forever, and it's a bit of a grind.
Yeah.
But no, the world kind of writes itself back, and where you're positioned at that time matters a lot. And actually, for an overall health of the business, that's what matters the most, is in what position you find yourself at the end. And there's this this notion of winning in the turns, where for racing car drivers, which I'm not, that's where people pass each other. It's in the turns on a racing circuit. So the 4 things that have been pretty consistent through each one of these downs, followed by ups. And probably the very first one is trading up on talent. When there's big upheaval in the market, there's always a ton of talent available, coming from all kinds of places. And if at the same time, you see your own teams in a new light, because when the circumstances are tough, some are actually right, and not always those that you predict, rise up to the challenge in terms of performance and focus and commitment, and others just don't. So that's an opportunity to strengthen your team. The second is usually these periods are connected to big changes in customer buying patterns for whatever reason, whether it's economic or behavioral, like would be the case with the current pandemic.
Right.
So the question there is, how at the end of the day, you're selling value to customers, and it's really hard to keep your pulse on the value that you're delivering if you're not super close to them. So it's always a good idea to be close to customers, but in times like these, you have to be as close as you can. Not so much to try to sell more to them, but more to understand what they're dealing with and how you can help.
Right.
Third one is a value proposition question, where whatever goes in good times, wherever the value proposition settled in good times, it may actually be, and that's what's kind of the playbook that salespeople run. In tougher times, the value proposition actually may not be playing in the same way, and that you need to kind of iterate your value proposition until you find a good fit to these new conditions. And that's something that is not really for the product organization to do. I mean, they need to be involved, but it needs to be led by the sales team. Because sales team is really the organization in the company that is in constant contact with customers and has those insights.
Right.
And then the final one is, again, in good time, when things are running, there's always a ton of bureaucracy that kind of creeps up on everyone. In bad times, you don't have time for too much of that. And so there's a job which is to kind of protect your sales team from the rest of the organization that tends to, when you're on the back lines, if you're not exposed to the mayhem in front, you actually don't see that things have really shifted, and so you continue doing what you're used to doing. So usually the support functions, for example, don't know how much pressure the frontline guys are under. And so one job you have to commit to is to protect them from the rest of the organization, at least during the times where they need to be protected. So these would be the four.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So it seems those four, there are two that kind of sit within the salespeople and how they need to perform, and then the other two is really for the sales leader to be able to support them. So maybe if we start with the two that really are for the salespeople, which is getting as close as possible to your buyers, and number two, which is the value proposition. And it sounds like you can't really do the value proposition if you're not close to your buyers, because you want to understand what that value proposition is. So how should salespeople go about doing that? Because it's very easy to ask them to get close to the buyers, but a lot of them either don't know how to, or they attempt to do that, and they probably do it quite well, but they don't translate that into an adaptation of their approach that's going to help them improve sales. So how do you see some of the best sellers doing?
Well, first of all, there's a set of attributes for sellers that tend to perform well in general, but especially well in a recession. And we can talk about that as part of another question. But one of the biggest attribute is what I would call, or IBM used to call, intellectual curiosity. So it's the desire to understand how things work and why things are the way they are, right? And so it's not settling for the, well, I believe this is the way things are, and therefore the reality conforms to my belief. It's actually having a real appetite to discover what is it that's what kind of pressure customers are under, and having that conversation with them. Right. And so now it's not a revealed behavior to all salespeople. Not all know how to do it, and so on and so forth. But I mean, and the thing is that you can't just tell people to go do that, because that just doesn't work. So you actually have to show it, and the best way to show it is to actually identify some of the stars in your sales team that are able to do this naturally, and to have to use them as demonstrators almost, so that the rest of the sales team can see what kind of approach these guys are employing. And the second thing is during a time like this, there's a ton of noise, right? So in other words, on 100 customers, where in good times you're going to have a pretty consistent pattern of needs and expectations, et cetera, et cetera. In a recession, actually, the spread from across the spectrum of needs and patterns is much bigger. So it's hard. The signal to noise thing is harder to do. And what these star sellers are able to do is to differentiate the two and to know where to run. And so what's pretty effective is to actually use them to crystallize the story for the rest of the sales team about what is unfolding in the market. So in other words, to say, well, here are some observed customer behaviors, here are some observed patterns of needs that they're revealing, and here's what it means, and here's what it means for everyone, so that these few thought leaders, if you will, in your sales team, you can amplify their discovery, their messages, and kind of capture the rest of the sales team with it.
So how do you, what do you see as the best ways to get those either top performing sellers or those who conduct or get closer to the buyers a lot better than others? How do you get them to share those insights, and certainly valuable insights that differentiate between the noise and something that's truly valuable?
The best way to share is actually on well, there are two. There's a job for the sales leader to be close enough to these guys, and to, when I say close enough, it's also be out in the market,
right?
To kind of extract that narrative from them and from the signal that you receive as a leader, and to establish that narrative internally and reinforce it through broader communications, or even individual discussions with frontline managers, or whoever it is. At the end of the day, there is a story that runs on the sales floor, and the job of the leader is to shape that story based on the inputs that you get both from the markets and from the star sellers. So the story itself, kind of ends up reinforcing, establishing context. As far as changing behavior, so having people that were used to selling a certain way and now shifting to a new one, the best way I found is to actually have, for lack of a better word, deal clinic type gatherings, where you put 1 or 2 star sellers and then, I don't know, 10 or 12 who are just run of the mill or new or whatever, and you basically go through opportunities, not star seller opportunities, but those from that are on the table for the rest of the sales team, and have the team brainstorm for 5 to 10 minutes around, what's happening, what have you heard, what questions have you asked, where are you going next, and so on and so forth. And it both reinforces the fact that, we're all in this together, but also starts propagating this way of approaching the market in a way that's more viral than if you try to institutionalize it too much.
Right. And those deal clinics, I'm aware of those because we used to do that a lot, especially when we were working together.
Yep.
And they were incredibly helpful. I think for some of the sales leaders on the podcast right now, they're probably asking, well, how often do we conduct such deal clinics? And obviously that will depend on the sales cycle, and there's a proportionality to it. But how often would you say is the kind of the right balance to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for first of all, these things can't be too long, right? Because the math of it mean that you're gonna how to say, if you put 30 people in a clinic and you try to spend a good 5-10 minutes per deal, then you're going to have a bunch of people who are going to be left out in the dust, and you can't keep people for more than an hour really into a room for this kind of activity.
Right.
So what worked best was less than 10 people, of which maybe 5 or 6 come in with a deal, and we spend 10 minutes on each. Everyone brainstorms. You can do that once a week is probably a minimum, but it's probably better if you can do more. So twice a week is probably a max. And it can be, and what worked best is to do this across teams. So in other words, kind of mix and match people with different accounts, different regions, etc., because it actually also creates a sense of community between people that in everyday don't necessarily work together in that way. So
right, okay. And I want to dig into just the final part in terms of that getting close to the buying behavior, because it's such a critical thing. And I'm sure there are a ton of sellers who are just asking, just thinking, well, what if I can't rely on some of these other salespeople in my team, and especially with the pressures of hitting quota during such tough times. It almost sounds like you're describing a trait, which is intellectual curiosity. But I think a lot of people want to have some kind of framework or some kind of idea of how could they easily start to understand the buyer's process. What kind of questions should they be asking their buyers, or what kind of cues or signals should they be looking out for from their buyers?
Well, I mean, that all depends on the selling methodology, but I think what becomes a little bit of a routine sales process in good times needs to shift a couple of gears up in bad times. So there are always pretty consistent questions that you can ask your sales team to try to push them on the right tracks when they're in front of a customer. So, for example, I've had many conversations with sellers where if you asked, okay, they're going to buy your widget A, whatever it is, what are they going to do with it? And you'd be surprised at how many actually would say, well, we didn't have a very clear answer. Well, they're just going to use it. But what do you mean they're going to use it for what? Like to accomplish what job? And often the answer there is too shallow. And it's never a good thing in good times, but in bad times, it's very unforgiving, where if you don't know what the customer is going to do with what you're selling to them, then the customer probably doesn't know either, unless you're very lucky. And
Right.
if they don't know, it's going to be very difficult for them to justify to themselves, even as good protector shareholder value, or to their internal organization, the investment. So what are they going to do with it? What could they do without it? So in other words, if they don't have it, are they going to, what happens? Do they get fired because this is absolutely necessary to them doing their job, or frankly, no one would know? And and there's always a range of answers between the no one would know and they're going to get fired. But you got to have some precision around where you are on that range to be able to guide, your level of expectation for the deal and what you're going to do next.
Right.
So then, and trying to put a dollar figure on it is a good idea, right? So you have the, usually two sides to the value that customers receive from whatever they're buying. One side is personal value, which is what they are getting personally out of the transaction. Maybe it makes them look good, gets them smarter, increases their standing with their team, or it's just interesting to them. So that's personal value. But in these times, I'm not saying that personal value doesn't matter, but you have to have it backed up by some kind of business value that you can point to a dollar figure for. And so to the question is, what are you going to do with it? Can you do without it? Are really questions that are asked internally of someone who is investing company dollars in something. And personal value doesn't come into play in that question. What you have there only is, well, this is what it's going to help us do for the business. And by the way, this is how many dollars we're talking about in terms of impact.
Right.
And then there's the question of, are these real P&L dollars, or are they dollars in 5 years? So, real P&L dollars is stuff that, we're going to save you, this widget is going to save you money. Well, it's actually going to save you money in your current fiscal year exercise, and you're going to, you're going to spend 100 and you're going to get 150 back within the year. That's a really powerful value proposition in a recession. Fake money is this is going to improve your productivity over the next 10 years. So in other words, it's really projected dollars for the long term, which in times of recession, unless you're aligned with some very strategic objective, is unlikely to punch through. These questions actually end up activating the intellectual curiosity muscle for sellers, where if they want to be able to answer these questions they have to ask, and they have to get into it with clients in a way that's very truthful, and kind of like let go of the mask of I'm a seller and I'm trying to sell you something that I'm not sure what benefit it really provides to you. To one of, well, let's have the conversation about what that benefit is, how much value it represents in this context, how fast, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so that's really interesting. And I have one more question about the buyer, getting close to the buyer side, because I feel we can discuss this for at least 2 or 3 hours. It's such a big topic.
Sure.
But I want to cover the leadership aspects of the 4 that you talked about. So last question on buyer, because when we talk about getting closer to the buyer, instinctively, when you say that to a lot of salespeople, they think buyer behavior. They think about the buying process and how they make those decisions. They think about potentially, stakeholders and how to manage their stakeholders. What's your advice there? How should sellers ask and get to really understand what that process is like and how that changes?
Hmm. Well, so one of the issues with the selling stuff is that it, it, always, when that's true in good times, you always make up assumptions, right? And the assumptions are about what value your product provides. In reality, what value is perceived by the buyer, how much money does the buyer have to spend on stuff, what's the purchasing process, et cetera, et cetera. And in good times, things are relatively stable, and usually these assumptions are based on history, right? So
Right.
For the past 3 years or 2 years, this company has, or even this individual has bought things in a certain way. So therefore, we assume that that's going to be the case now. So the first thing is to basically just disconnect the assumption engine. So there's no more assumptions, and so you show up to a conversation with someone whom you know, and you actually have to restart from scratch and remap the entire story because things probably have changed on their side.
Right.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is that buyers are actually, they're individuals. So the question of personal value, I mentioned that you have this personal and business value side to a deal. The business value side, it needs to be there for almost justification reasons, right? So
Right.
in hard times, you never buy something that could be questioned by the shareholders, right? So you're not going to buy something that would be bad for the company. However, your decision to buy one thing rather than another, or one vendor rather than another, ends up being a very personal value-driven decision based on the value you have in the relationship with the vendor, the value of the brand, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are actually a couple of, there's one example that comes to mind from, that was in 2008, I believe, where one of our, and I can say it because it's long enough, I think. We were working with Nokia, who was at the time going through very, very tough cost-cutting, change in strategy, just massive upheaval in the company, and the crisis in the background.
Right.
So like the worst possible situation. And at the time we had a contract with the CHRO, who, HR, when companies cut costs, tends to be one of the first places you go because it's it's kind of free money for the CFO. It's SG&A, you can just pick it up and you only pay for it later. And we'd kind of given up on them, renewing what was, I think it was a $60,000 or $70,000 contract, and said, well, the CFO has dictated a cost-cutting mandate. They're going to, it's going to go with that. And actually, what happened is that the CHRO was personally attached to this service and decided to go and, defend it to the CFO.
Right.
And when we actually found, this became a story of, dragon slaying by the CHRO, who kind of defended against the mighty CFO and, probably took, a 50-page slide deck. Actually, it happened over breakfast and over the course of less than a 30-second conversation, which was, well, why don't we cut it? And the CHRO said, because I don't want to. And that was the end of the conversation.
Wow. Okay.
So in other words, the personal value thing ends up becoming a real big driver. And if someone really wants something in times like now, they'll find a way to justify it and to get it through.
Yes.
So for all the deals that are kind of stuck, or that where we get returns where people say, well, my budget was kind of cut, et cetera, usually behind it there is either an issue of individual power, sort of the ability to assert what the executive's power, or they're not personally convinced that this is the way to move forward, and that's some work for the seller to do.
So it's interesting you're saying that. So it's almost like you're saying the business value, the money, the dollar value, the pound value, whatever currency behind it is almost table stakes, like in poker. You've got to have it to even have a seat at the table to have that kind of discussion. Mm-hmm. But what really pushes the buyer to select, or at least to actually champion your solution, is how much of a personal value is attached to it. And not in technicalities. I was expecting you to talk about technicalities, but it's almost saying, if there is enough personal value for me to believe enough in it, that I want to fight for it.
That's
right. And that's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's if you really think about what makes people fight in tough times, it's when their heart's involved, right? It's when they believe into some kind of cause that will get them out in the streets, or I mean, in France we do that every 5 minutes, so that's a little bit different. But it's what gets you up in the face of a CFO to say, look, this matters to me, and you need the good shareholder justification. But just the dry look, this is worth $50,000, and we're going to make $100,000 with it. This can always be challenged. This will always lose let's say an executive decision-making committee. It will always lose against another executive who says, well, mine maybe makes less money, but I really, really want it. Because it's important to me, it's important to my team, and it's going to make us win in the long run, and whatever story comes to their mind.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you talk about that, because I have regular discussions like this with clients and stakeholders in my community, where we talk about, you call it personal value, and I talk about it in terms of almost emotional and human needs value, right? Mm-hmm. So, we make our decisions based upon emotions. And we try to justify that through logic, which is where the business value comes in. But mm-hmm. if you've aligned your solution, or at least the benefits of your solution, to a deep-seated human need that person has, and it could be one of 6 to 8, depending on which framework you use. But if this person is all about certainty, but your solution presents uncertainty and risk and long-term, then it doesn't matter how good the numbers are. You're just not aligned to that person's deep-seated human needs. Consequently, if that person is about, for example, growth, but you're talking about certainty and how to stabilize a business, but this person's about ambition, about growth, about taking a little bit of risk because they want to go places, then you're incongruent with that human need that person has. So it's very interesting that you talk about that, and that's something that maybe is going to be for another discussion, because again, that's a very big talk track.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing in the recession type of environment is that there is a moment where if you look at the hierarchy of needs, like the primary one is survival, and so an executive will give up personal value, or will give up anything to first survive.
Yeah.
Right. So in their organization, in their role, so it's very rare that one will actually go to bat with the risk of losing their job for it. But once, if that's not the situation, then the marriage between their personal aspiration and the offer that you're having on the table is super important, is almost more important than ever, because there are so many obstacles that they're going to have to overcome. And what powers, I mean, their engine to overcome these obstacles is their belief. And so it's their belief in their life becoming better with your solution. And that belief is rooted in the things that you've described.
Great. Yeah. I'm just conscious of time, so there's a few other things I really want to get your insights on and your experience on. And before I ask the next question, which is around the leadership side, any attendees online, feel free to post your questions. There's an open chat box, and we will do our best to get those answered either during the session. If not, we will organize an email that will go out to everyone with those questions answered. So the other two areas that you talked about, Christophe, is the leadership side of things. And I think for sales leaders, it's important, but it's even more critical for the sellers themselves, because in times of high pressure, they need that support, especially from leaders that they believe in. So you talked about the two things. Number one was shielding and protecting the sellers from other parts of the organization where it's not malicious, it's just that they're not fully involved and appreciate what's happening at the front lines. And you also talked about trading up on talent during a recession period, and it's critical for salespeople. Let's start with the shielding side of things, because talent could be a situation where people are just not going to be hiring, and it's about internal talent and coaching, so we'll come on to that. But what are the things that you advise around shielding sellers from the rest of the organization? How would you go about that? What are some of the critical things, or what is the advice that you would give for any sales leaders listening to this?
Well, I mean, sales leaders typically are the voice of their teams, right? That's usually a natural trait to the rest of the organization.
Right.
And actually, in good times, you'll find that sales teams tend to have a special place on the corporate chessboard. In that they're really the motor of the company, right? So they're important to get right. In times of recession, it's relatively easy to make the case to the executive committee that the sales team needs to be protected at all costs.
Right.
Back to the trading up on talent, the last thing you want during a recession is to have your competitors, whether they're business competitors or talent competitors, picking up your best sales talent because they don't feel supported, or because they don't feel like they can be successful, they don't have faith in the business. And when the recession is over and you're picking up some steam, well, you no longer have your Formula One engine in the front. That's a big problem. So it's relatively easy to make the case to the rest of the organization and say, back off of a certain number of things. Now the question is, what things?
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you take a really big company, and putting aside the manufacturing and R&D engines, the frontline teams end up being the fighting unit that's close to the market, that's supposed to be dealing with all these changes, and interestingly, these are typically teams that are asked to execute, right? So in other words, the center has a certain way to do things, and you guys in the front lines, you go execute my plan because that's how things are done.
Yeah.
And usually if it's like times are good, the two are relatively closely aligned and it kind of works. In times of strife, that's usually not the case. And so the front line needs to pick up the initiative and say, okay, center, you back off a bit. It's for me, because I've got the boots on the ground, to understand what's happening, what we need, what resources, additional resources we need, what we need to stop doing, and so on and so forth. And so one of the ways that you can do that is first give people a voice about that. Like, most sellers are actually relatively disciplined and, say, well, that's the way we do things in this company, even if it's silly. And this is a time to say, well, guys, let's look at what we're doing right now. And are there things that we could completely remove from the picture because they're just consuming a bunch of your time or your energy at a time where you need all of it to be customer facing? Are there ways of working that are getting in the way? So unnecessary reporting burden, unnecessary matrix type of burden, because in modern organization there are plenty of ways for things to get lost. Kind of holding back on any super long-term projects. So if you have like big transformation thing that's running, just say like push it out so that you can focus on the task at hand. And so there's actually great benefit in giving the sales team a voice and telling them, look, let's discover together what's the right way of working for this environment that maximizes the time that you spend with customers and minimizes the time that you spend doing stuff that's not immediately useful.
So just to be clear, you're not saying that the company should forego R&D in the long-term project. It's just more sales involvement in those things. If they have
it's saying that if you think about HR, IT, marketing, all these support functions have to acknowledge the fact that things have changed in the front line, to tell them where to back off. And for that, it's sales leader should be the voice, but the people who actually write that story are the guys in the front line. And it's a really valid conversation to have with them.
Right.
We need to change goals, structures, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. That's interesting. So the sales leader really must have the courage and almost the strength in order to be able to create that pushback in a professional way and to almost reassess, how is time being spent by the team, and where they're being involved in certain things, and is that really conducive to core vital activities, especially during recession. Yeah. So we talk quite a lot about what to do and what to focus on. Let's go to the opposite, which is, what are the things that you advise to avoid doing? Like, because a lot of the people joining this podcast and going to be listening later on, a lot of them are probably doing things that, in your experience, are time drain, and we really want to be able to give them some advice about what are the things they should stop doing because they're not going to actually help them.
So that's actually, it's difficult to generalize on it because it really depends on the organization.
Yeah.
If you were to look at put yourself in a seller's shoes for 3 days and literally just walk with them to see what they're doing, where they're spending their time, energy, and how they're spending it, you would uncover a ton of clutter, basically, a ton of stuff. Impossible to call out where it is, but it's always there. And because clutter is what grows in good times, so we're coming out of like 15 years of or not 15, but 12 years of uninterrupted run. and a lot of clutter has built up around everything, right? And
Right.
so there is that, and it's usually invisible from the leadership, because leadership is usually who has put the clutter in place to monitor, to do all kinds of things. So it's almost like reversing the perspective and looking at it from the perspective of frontline folks, and that's where you see the clutter and you see the experience destroyers, basically, that you can and should remove. But in terms of other things to do, and as you said, we're not officially in a recession, but usually the official call kind of comes like 6-9 months after it's actually happened. So you don't have time to wait for that to operate in a new way. Probably the first thing that you want to avoid is when things slow down, which they are right now around the world. Salespeople get caught in that narrative of, well, there's no business to be done, right? Which is that's what everybody says. Therefore, it must be true.
Right.
So there's it's really important for the sales leader to rewrite the narrative, and that's not a general one. It's for the organization. That captures what business. It's not that there's no business to be done. Is that the business to be done has now shifted, and we got to find it. And it's still there, but it's just have changed shape and changed expectations, as we talked about earlier. So there's things to avoid as a leader is first to give into the narrative and to just say, "Yep, you know what, you're right. We're screwed," because that usually doesn't end well.
Right.
Second is got to be really careful with plans and targets. Some companies are very resistant to moving the goalposts in the mid-year when a recession hits, and so objectives and targets and comp, etc., for salespeople. At the end of the day, you end up doing it when things get really hard. So you're better off actually being deliberate about it rather than being reactive.
Right.
It's a testament to your willingness to treat your people well is usually well received. So third is to get caught for too long in the, well, we have a playbook, we just apply it, and that's you have kind of two leadership behaviors when times are or get tough. One is to basically harden the discipline and not change any of the approach, and it's actually tapping into the wrong side of people, but that's my opinion.
Right.
So pushing them harder to do the same things that worked in good times is usually going to result in more frustration and disbelief on the company's objective, and that's how your best sales performer will be poached. Because there are companies that are smarter than you about that. The other approach is, it is actually time to empathize with the sellers that are in the front line, understand what they're going through, and kind of create a new narrative that they're co-creating, really, so that you're doing that together and they're actors of it. That's a much better approach to adapt to this type of situation.
Right. Okay. And that kind of makes sense when you think about what we've been talking about, which is getting close to the buyers, because if the way the buyers conduct themselves is different, then expecting your salespeople to do more of what they did before is not going to work if that is incongruent with how the buyers are acting.
Yeah, but back to the protecting your team from the organization. It's there are many, in particular, people that are not in front lines in the company that will try to push for just do whatever we're doing before, but do it harder.
Right.
And so it's a tough spot for a sales leader to be in, because you got to push back around, or, against those instincts.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Agreed. Yeah. And you've discussed something that I want to spend the last 9 or 10 minutes or so talking, because it's a topic that's very close to my heart, and it's something I'm involved with my clients a lot. And you've mentioned it as one of your first points, which is the mindset. And when times are tough, that mindset can take a battering. It really tests you. And that can affect how you are with your clients. It's pretty obvious. And it's one of the things that I see not being addressed at all, not at all, but very, very rarely addressed by sales trainers or even the sales leaders themselves. It's more of a cursory approach. What's your take on the importance of mindset of traditional sales skills, particularly in times of recession? And as a sales leader, what do you advise leaders should do about it or approach it?
So first of all, I agree with you that mindset is, it is everything. The problem with it is that it's hard to act on mindset.
Right.
So there's and I don't have a good theory of, the automatic mindset machine,
right.
Unfortunately. But a few pointers. Number one, the leadership team plays a hugely important role in that mindset. There's everyone in the front line is watching what leaders do,
right,
when times are tough, right? And when I say leaders, it's basically the management team in any frontline organization. And they don't necessarily look at one leader in particular. They look at the behavior of the leadership group. Right. And the first thing they look at is how much faith do they have in the business, right? And it's something that like dogs will sense everything that in you, like the fear or the whatever. Well, people will sense if someone doesn't actually believe in the business, and they'll sense it before they know it. And that sense ends up translating into a subtle shift in their mindset of, well, it looks like maybe they're not so sure that we're going to, pull through in this recession. And therefore, maybe I'm not so sure. And that's when things start, right? So that's the first thing. And when they look at the group of leaders, what's really interesting is that it only takes one of, let's say you've got 20 leaders in a group. Leaders, managers, whatever you call them. They will, if one of them breaks the line, it will immediately, everyone will kind of realize that that's the case, and it becomes literally a breach in the collective mindset that
right.
they're being asked to uphold. And if the management team is not upholding it, then it all goes to ground.
Right. Okay.
So it's a that's probably the first thing. The second is mindset ends up being the it's a state, right? It's how you see yourself in a certain situation. That is the result of whatever experience you have of when you're getting your work done as a seller. Right. So you talk to customers, you talk to your colleagues, you talk to managers, basically, that's kind of it. And your experience when you do these things will actually dictate your mindset. And then your mindset will then, in turn, feed your experience, right? So there's that loop of the things that you actually do and how you feel about them.
Right.
And so the how you feel, you can't, besides what I mentioned, which is kind of that mirroring mindset of leaders, is maybe the one thing you can do as a leader. But the best thing you can do is to get after what is it that people are doing. And so it goes back to the beginning of our conversation about what kind of conversation do you have with customers? If what you're doing is banging on their door every day to say, I have one more discount for you, sir.
Yeah.
Your experience as a seller is going to be pretty poor. Because you're going to feel like you're adding no value and you're not being successful. Your mindset is going to suffer, and then you have a bit of a downward spiral. So if you're able to help your sellers understand how to have a good experience as an individual selling in a recession, which means that's intellectual curiosity, being like brutally honest with customers about what they're going through, what you can do for them, and so on and so forth. Right. Then their experience becomes better, and then they believe more, and the whole collective mindset starts shifting.
Interesting. Okay. So we're talking about leaders basically setting an example, and because at the first level people look to their leaders for that support, especially during recession. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, it also affects in terms of mindset, it affects their approach, where if they are approaching their buyers in the wrong way and use the example of discounts, that is not exactly a great experience for the seller or the buyer. And actually that sets the wrong mindset, which is more of a restrictive mindset, right? Rather than an abundance mindset or mindset focused on actually giving value. Now you're almost kind of degrading value if you're going down the discounting route.
That's right. So in a way, it's being focused on the experience that your sellers have of selling in this environment, and enabling them with what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. With the basically the right approaches, and helping them find the right approaches so that their experience is a good one. And if their experience is a good one, their mindset is going to be up there.
Okay. So just in the last 2 minutes, then, I know you said you don't have a theory in terms of the mindset, but you talked about leaders setting the example. How do you as a leader make sure that your mindset is in the right frame and the right emotional state? Even though as a leader, you're privy to more information and you might be feeling those things. I remember you and I discussed this before when we went, but you can't show that. So how do you set yourself in the right mindset?
Well, so it's interesting because you're a leader in a recession, regardless of whether it's sales leader or other kind. You're kind of caught in between two worlds, right? It's the world of you of course worry about where things are going, and how much business are we going to do, and you don't know, right? Because you're not the one doing the business; your sellers are. So what's going to happen next? And it's pretty easy to get yourself in a tizzy about that, and getting yourself really worried. So that's not something that should transpire to teams. However, you can't completely you can't be different on the outside than what you're on the inside either, right? So you can't really hide your emotions and be Mr. Ice Cube. And so there's actually, it's trying to figure out what is the right level of transparency that you need to have with your teams about what it is that you're really worried about, and try to distill it into constructive questions that are things to actually go work on rather than worry about.
Right.
And then it becomes a conversation which both decreases your anxiety level and also makes the team feel like you're not putting a smoke screen and pretending that everything is okay, right? So there's a the thing that people don't like is worry. However, problems are things that people can deal with, and that you can deal with as a team. And the fact that you share what these potential problems are, obstacles, etc., and that you're trusting your team to help, figure it out, actually becomes a really positive thing. So
that's really interesting. So if I understand what you're saying correctly, it's about being genuine and not saying that nothing is going wrong or that it's not going to be challenging or tough times, but it's almost turning people's focus away from the fact that it's a challenge or a tough time into almost a solution mode or project. How do we approach this as a project? So it's really about focus here rather than hiding the fact that you're going through a tough time, or even being overly confident, which could equal delusion, being delusional.
That's right, because every individual out there worries, right? So when you look at the news, everyone tells you the economy is going down, the recession, the pandemic, like whatever the story is. And leaders are worried, but individual sellers are worried too, and everyone is worried basically. So if you can shift the conversation from how worried you and everybody else is, and give a place for that worry to exercise and to act, then suddenly it generates positive energy rather than worry, which is not very useful and pretty negative in general.
So it's a balance between empathy and acknowledgement with focused attention. It's not focused attention, but focused outcomes almost, and figure out where to go. That's super interesting. This has been and I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone else here who's attending and who will be listening to the recording of this later on. This has been a really, really interesting discussion, and you've shared some incredibly valuable points from how sales leaders should protect and serve and kind of support their sellers during a recession, but also things like getting close to the buyers, right? Not just in terms of value and personal value, but how they're starting to change their buyer processes and how sellers need to start to, not just where they need to focus, but how they need to conduct those activities as well. So this has been a super helpful and interesting podcast. And I want to thank you, Christophe, for taking the time to share your advice. And I know there are a ton of salespeople and sales professionals and even business leaders, solopreneurs who will be listening to this that would really appreciate what you've shared here. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Mo. It was good to spend time with you. Good luck to everyone for the coming times. It's going to be an interesting period. So looking forward to the challenge.
Agreed. As you said, as you said to me when we were working together, how you come out, how you deal with this kind of makes or breaks how the kind of person you come out of this.
That's true too.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't want to get all philosophical, but it's true.
Well, thank you so much, Christophe, again, and best of luck as well with your own business and what you're going to be doing. Thank you everyone else for attending.
Yeah, you guys have a good weekend. Bye.
Take care. Thank you very much. Bye bye.